Good morning. Good morning. Happy Saturday to everyone who's watching. Welcome to the first ever. It is SciChat Saturday. This is a new thing for this channel. This is only the second time that I've gone live publicly here, so it is certainly new to me. Welcome to all of you who might be watching or who was watching this on replay. If you like what you see, of course, hit the like button and share the video and subscribe to the channel and all that lovely good jazz. This is going to be a new monthly thing on Saturday mornings, once a month, at least for now. And today I'm flying solo, but actually I'm making deliberate point. We're going to be getting some guests lined up. I have a few names you might recognize and the few that you don't probably recognize. That will be joining us. It is a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. And the idea with SciChat Saturday is really just to get into a topic somewhat informally, just to chit chat about it, and to have a good old time that way. And that's why when I bring guests on, it'll be quite just informal conversations about things going on, in particular things going on. And for this first one, flying solo here today, there's one particular topic that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to bring that up here shortly, but it is an interesting topic. A lot of you have probably heard of the notion. Oh, and before I forget, happy Halloween for everybody. For everybody on Monday, if you're celebrating Halloween, have a very happy Halloween. You can tell I've got my Halloween decorations here. But the topic of the day is misinformation and disinformation research. There is a lot of that going on now too, alongside of the continued bringing up of misinformation and disinformation. And of course, what was it? The Disinformation Governance Board, I think it was, that DHS had at one point, and then canned after very much outcry and to some degree to mockery, as I understand it. And that's actually what I want to get into, because in supporting in around the conversation around misinformation, of course, there is also somebody doing research on misinformation and disinformation. And it came to my attention after watching a live, actually, it was Deprogrammed with Carrie Smith, I believe, is actually what I was watching at the time. And she had Deb Philman on, and they hit this point in conversation. I wanted to revisit it because it would not just be, how should I put this? Not just be something that one could be interested in, but also it is a good example and good way to get into how do you find out more information about how said research was funded. Things that we also want to get to know of, get to know, because after all, a lot of research in the United States is funded by your taxpayer dollars. If you recall, in 2017, the March for Science got started after President Trump was elected, and I think when they did this, I gotta find the study again, but correct me if I'm wrong. But when they did the survey, it was something like 91% of 91% of the scientists who participated because they were afraid their funding was going to get cut. And such is the case, because there is a lot of scientific research funding that is paid for courtesy of the federal government. And so, you do have some of that going on, which is a concern. But where it drew my attention to, now let me bring this up for you guys. To share screen. Here we go. I think it worked. There we go. Look at that. So this was drawn to my attention. Tweet from Robbie Starbuck back at the beginning of the month on the Election Integrity Partnership here. And it certainly was an interesting thing to see this come up, because of some of the things that are invested and involved in it. Oh boy. And I would take a wager. I mean, he's talking here about some of the grants that all of them have received and all this kind of stuff in this particular tweet, with the amount of money that's involved. Grant each of them received from the Biden administration. I guarantee you they've probably been around longer than that and probably got grants under the Trump administration too. So I would not say that this is solely under a Biden administration thing, just to be perfectly frank. So yeah, 3 million in August 2021 from the National Science Foundation. If it's National Science Foundation, it is your taxpayer dollars. So please remember that kind of thing. Hold on a second. I'm going to change this just a little bit how this is set up. I don't like how this is set up. So let me change it just a touch. Hang on. Much better. Ta-da! Okay, much better. With that in mind. So with this particular times then streaming, so we're getting used to some of the different things going on here. And one of the interesting things with this is the idea that having this kind of research. So what does it mean to research misinformation in here? What does it mean to do that? And it's an interesting thing because it also I have yet to hear, as we've been doing some of the digging in this, I have yet to see these research entities give a very cogent definition of what they call misinformation. Colloquially, it seems to be more so the idea that misinformation is not a malicious lie necessarily, but unknowingly being wrong about something and spreading something that's just untrue. Whereas disinformation is the more malicious lie, is what it seems to be equated as in here. So with that in mind, I thought it would be interesting to explore a little bit the so-called election integrity partnership and get into not necessarily what the election integrity partnership itself is doing, but looking at these two institutions, the Stanford Internet Observatory with the Cyber Policy Center and the University of Washington Center for an Informed Public, because these are the kinds of ones that are getting into some of the research surrounding mis and disinformation. And it certainly would be interesting to have a look at them. And Stanford's an interesting case because Stanford is... For having this Internet Observatory studying misinformation, I would also note that Stanford is also hosting an academic freedom conference coming up here soon, which is great. I mean, I'm actually all for that kind of idea, seeing the academic freedom conference. Wow, it's good morning for me. The academic freedom conference come up. And it's certainly an interesting idea. It's already getting slandered as being just a something going on in a vacuum kind of thing. But it's interesting to see it being held at Stanford also when Stanford has the Stanford Internet Observatory. So let's read here a moment. No area of society has avoided disruption by new internet technologies, and God only knows, is that the truth? Democracy, media, education, these fields will continue to face continued upheavals, as we deal with the impact of billions of people having access to both high quality information and disinformation on demand. This is something I've noticed. I don't know if others have noticed it too, but it seems like misinformation and disinformation are getting used interchangeably, which is a little strange. Unfortunately, the political and social sciences have been slow to build their capacities to study the negative impact of technology, partially due to lack of data access, information resources, and individuals with the necessary backgrounds to sift through exabytes of data. That's a crap ton of data, by the way. What is it? It's terabytes, it's petabytes. I think exabyte is after petabyte. I forget. But anyway, that is a crap ton of data either way. For centuries, physicists and astronomers have coordinated resources to build massive technological infrastructure to further their field. With infinitely expanding data and content, researchers need infrastructural capabilities to research this new information frontier. The Stanford Internet Observatory is a cross-disciplinary program of research, teaching, and policy engagement for the study of abuse in current information technologies with a focus on social media. Under the program direction of computer security expert Alex Stamos, the observatory was created to learn about the abuse of the internet in real time, develop a novel curriculum on trust and safety that is a first in computer science, and to translate our research discoveries into training and policy innovations for the public good. By providing researchers across Stanford with cutting-edge data analytics and machine learning resources, we will unlock completely unforeseen fields of research. We envision a world where researchers do not limit themselves to the data that is easy to access, but instead dive into the toughest and most important questions by leveraging the capabilities of the Stanford Internet Observatory. So really, this is around to help with the research side of things and to help make sure that that research is actually getting done appropriately here. So this is certainly of interest to me here, and this is more about the research. You wouldn't think it's about influencing the election, or any election really. It's more so about research, and that's actually what I'm more interested in with this than necessarily anything that's doing to do with the election. You can actually see they have their own journal about the online trust and safety, right? So let's have a look momentarily if it'll load. Oh, look at that. Trust and safety research proceedings. The misinformation paradox. Older older adults are cynical about news media but engage with it anyway. Promoting online civility through platform architecture. Hmm. Um American parents' perceptions of child explicit. What? That's not what I was expecting to read. Creating, using, and misusing deepfakes, demographics of international influence operation affecting Facebook users in the United States, auditing Google search headlines as a potential gateway to misleading content, evidence from the 2020 election. So let's see. This is Stanford Internet Observatory runs this particular journal. And so get in research and peer-reviewed articles and all that kind of stuff that they publish. Let alone everything that the researchers at the Stanford Internet Observatory publish themselves. This issue of the Journal of Online Trust and Safety, which serves as conference proceedings for the Trust and Safety Research Conference, brings together new research, including a paper interviewing older adults. Okay, but okay. I'm just curious. Let's have a look at one of these studies. If we can get a look at it. Misinformation can be easily spread with the click of a button, but can cause irreversible harm and negatively impact news consumers' ability to discern false information. Some prior work suggests that older adults may engage with read, share, or believe. Read, share, or believe. Does believing something really count as engagement? I mean, read and share, sure, but believe? Interesting. Misinformation at higher rates than others. However, engagement explanations vary. In an effort to understand older adults' engagement with misinformation better, we investigate the misinformation experiences of older adults through their perception of prior media experiences. Analyzing 69 semi-structured interviews with adults 59 plus from the United States, the Netherlands, Bosnia, and Turkey, interesting combination of countries, we find that people have decades of potential exposure or experience with both online and traditional news media have reached a state of media cynicism in which they distrust most or even all of the news they receive. Yet, despite this media cynicism, older adults we study rarely fact-check the media they see and continue to read and share news they distrust. These findings suggest that this paradoxical reaction to media cynicism, in addition to prior explanations such as cognitive issues and digital literacy, may in part explain older adults' engagement with misinformation. Thus, we introduce the misinformation paradox, an additional area of research worth exploring. Misinformation paradox. Intriguing. Certainly intriguing, I would say. But aside from just the headline on the election integrity partnership, where Stanford's part of it, this is something to see. I'm just curious what the heck this is, because I'm just like, American parents' perceptions of a child explicit image sharing. I hope this doesn't get me kicked off. Parents and other adult caregivers of biologically or sociolegally related children, hereafter parents, can play an important role in the online behavior of children in their care. In the study, we examined parental correlates of 3 outcomes: talking to their child about image sharing, expecting a child has. I'm just not 100% sure I can say all of this on YouTube. Regression analyses reveal that talking to one's child about sexually explicit image sharing was significantly associated with the parent being a mother, having a child in high school, enforcing a higher number of technology rules, and knowing about secondary social media accounts and expecting that their child's friends share. somehow that's a result that I don't feel needed so much of a paper to explain. I would hope parents would be at this point, if they have parents with teenage kids, you know, watching watching for some of this stuff and talking to their kids about it. I would hope that's the case. I would. Fun enough. Okay. But let us get back here because all of this is, of course, run by the Stanford Internet Observatory in here. And so, what about other things that they themselves have published? And I don't necessarily mean the working papers or the testimonies because they obviously had somebody testify before the House committee on this kind of stuff. How about journal articles? Come on. Slow load today. There we go. Oh, look at that. Effectiveness of vaccination mandates and improving updates of COVID-19 vaccines in the United States. Content oblivious trust and safety techniques results from a survey of online service providers. Googling for abortion, in-house versus outsourced trolls. I do give them credit. Sometimes they do have some interesting titles for some of these studies that they put out here. But all of this is under the Internet Observatory, which, in the About section, as they listed here, they don't necessarily focus specifically on just misinformation, though they certainly do have that as a focus. But they're obviously talking about, how do people search for different things? How does trolling work? Which I don't know. I somehow I don't know that this is as necessary as they think it is. Just for kicks and giggles, let's look. Many high-income countries have rapidly pivoted from hard decisions about who may receive COVID-19 vaccines due to shortages to equally hard decisions about who must receive them. As lasting containment of COVID-19 remains elusive, many nations from Costa Rica to Austria to Turkmenistan are turning to vaccine mandates of various kinds, or vaccination mandates, excuse me. Mandates, however, are controversial in many countries. Austria's proposed mandates for adults, for example, provoke mass protests. I remember seeing the news clips about that, actually. Some objectors argue mandates represent undue encroachment on individual liberty. I kind of would agree. But anyway, some other objectors maintain that mandates will not be an effective policy for COVID-19 because many individuals will seek to evade them, and mandates might erode support for other public health measures such as mask wearing. In this viewpoint, we consider the likely effectiveness of policies. Okay, so this isn't peer-reviewed research. This is a perspective article, which is different. There's a very big difference between peer-reviewed research articles and perspective articles. So that's interesting to know. We consider the likely effectiveness of policies that require COVID-19 vaccines in improving vaccine uptake and reducing disease in the USA in view of the evidence from past vaccination mandates and distinctive aspects of COVID-19. Two dimensions of effectiveness in improving uptake are relevant. One, target group effectiveness, the extent to which the mandate improves uptake of vaccines in the group covered by the policy, and two, population effectiveness, the extent to which mandate policies improve vaccination coverage in the U.S. population. So there you go, is an interesting article that they have here. And it goes on. So all of these kinds of things fall. Again, Stanford is different because it's while they have misinformation and disinformation as one of their particular things, it's certainly not the only thing they get into, although it certainly is a high value thing for them in terms of discussing, what's going on here. I was browsing through this website and looking at some of the things going on here, and I'm not going to go through all of it right now. So I will give you the link, of course, when I repost this video later, because there's one goof I know I already made, so I'm going to repost this video later on rather than I'll repost this video later. Let's put it that way. Yeah, trust and safety. Wow, trust and safety engine. Okay, so they're teaching some of this stuff to undergrads. That's interesting. But That's one of them. The other center that features, oh, not here we go. The other center that features in the Election Integrity Partnership and does a lot of research around misinformation is this one here, the Center for an Informed Public, which they are actually much more explicit in their mission statement, saying to resist strategic misinformation, promote an informed society, strengthen democratic discourse. But if you're noticing, there's one thing, as much as I've searched through here, there's one thing I haven't seen, is I haven't seen these groups give a very, how should I put it, give give an actual definition for what misinformation is or what disinformation is. And so it's does become interesting to me that that is, shall we say, somewhat lacking. And yet this is what's studied. And so, part of the communications aspect, I struggle with this myself, is you have to be quite clear with your definitions and what things are. And it's funny when you're talking about misinformation and it's and it's not quite clear what they're talking about here. But yeah, this is certainly interesting. They actually created something called the Misinformation Escape Room. I haven't watched this yet, so I don't know what it is. They also, yeah. Oh, by the way, there's a Misinformation Day. Did you know that? Some of these researchers host Misinformation Day, which happened to be March 15th, 2022. So it's already happened this year. So come back around next year for sure. Hosting that particular aspect. And of course, they are actually much more, oh, hey, nature, human behavior. If you remember that, that was where they argued that you have to take into account with your research how it's going to affect society, rather than just the participants. There's a whole other video on this channel about that, so I'm not going to go into that one right now in depth. But I'm not surprised nature human behavior crops up. But I'm just curious because I have no idea what this is. Here, play informal a little bit. What is the Misinformation Escape Room? So I don't know if you all let me know if you've heard of escape rooms before, and what those are. Because I've seen them. What is it? Oh goodness. I forget. There's a couple of different companies that do them in different parts of the country, but the idea is you're put into a room and you've got clues and you got to figure out how to get out of the room in a certain amount of time. And so they created something called the Misinformation Escape Room. I don't know if anybody will be able to hear this, but I hope that will be the case. Oh, wait a minute. I know what happened. I didn't share sound. Hold that thought a second. Stop sharing. Put this over here for good measure. I didn't share the screen when I did this originally. I didn't share the sound. I mean, yeah, there we go. That would be helpful. Share sound. There we go. Let's try that again. And let's see what the heck this is about.
Misinformation is so powerful because it triggers emotional reactions. We needed to come up with another approach that was different than kind of the more conventional ways that we've thought about information literacy.
The game that we developed is a social and collaborative one. So people can play the game together and then reflect on the misinformation problem together, talk about how they process and share information in their lives, and maybe share some strategies that they have for combating misinformation so they can learn from each other as well.
Most people believe they are not vulnerable to misinformation. They believe it's only other people who are less educated or less savvy. The truth is we are all vulnerable. It's just who we are as humans.
So I'm actually going to throw them a bone on this, and I'm going to say that that's probably pretty true in terms of the research side of things. Everybody's vulnerable to falling for a lie or something that's just conspiracy theory-esque or what have you. I'm not going to deny that, but I still have yet to hear a definition for what misinformation is necessarily here. How do they define it, and all that? And it's still somewhat lacking, but maybe we'll get it somewhere.
So we wanted to create that sense of vulnerability. We wanted people to be fooled by misinformation. And through that experience, cause some people to help reflect, saying, oh, maybe
So
I'm
they
not as
intentionally tried to fool
invincible
people?
as I thought I was.
One interesting thing that we noticed was that a lot of people tend to underestimate their role in spreading misinformation, right? So often we'll hear people saying like, oh, I don't use social media that much, or I only share like memes and cat videos, or I only go and read information, I don't share anything. But the truth is, the person just being in that information environment actually does have impact on what kind of information comes to them, as well as what kind of information goes to other people, right? So we try to make that point really clear in the debrief session as well.
The distinctions between misinformation and disinformation were something that really seemed trivial to me, but
Where the hell is the
really
definition?
matter, and understanding just how
Where the hell's the
critical
actual
they
definition?
are in our, especially our day and age, you know, with wars going on, elections, politics, advertising.
So we originally developed this game as a completely virtual game. So it could be played on Zoom together with people in a group. But now we have a pop-up kit version of it, which
No.
can be played in person.
I really enjoy puzzle games, and so this was like cool to be able to like physically get my hands on the puzzle and be like, oh, okay, so this and this and this.
There's a puzzle involving images that are created by a computer that look incredibly realistic. And I think that one tends to stick with the players the most. They tend to talk about that afterwards in the debrief the most.
This is something that's really cool because it is challenging. It is truly challenging puzzles, and it gets people to recognize like, oh, yeah, okay, I have some work to do with this. I think everybody needs to play this game.
Sure, I can
Misinformation is
understand
a
that.
problem that affects everybody, and so anybody and everybody should play it.
Still
I
not
think
hearing a
everybody
definition
can
for what
benefit from
misinformation
what
is.
Virgin has to offer.
To be entirely truthful. I was like, I would love to know that.
What's brilliant about Euphorigen is that we're trying to use this escape room format, which is so popular, for something that, you know, public libraries have been trying to do for a while now. We've been wrestling with this complicated issue of misinformation. And
Librarians have also told us that the debrief session was really useful in terms of helping people connect their gameplay experience to their in real life experience with misinformation.
So the game host, whether it's a school teacher, a librarian, or somebody else in kind of an educational position, plays a super critical role. It turns out, you know, games are popular across all ages and demographics. We're really pleased that it is appealing to so many different people.
Now, okay. Didn't get a thing about whether or not about what that is actually misinformation. So that's interesting in and of itself. But again, there's this kind of thing is what this kind of thing, this escape room kind of thing is one of the things that comes out of research. You do see some of these kinds of research things, and obviously the center is very per their own mission statement is very, very invested in combating misinformation. And so this is one of the ones that I'm curious about, combining interventions to reduce the spread of viral misinformation. So this is from Nature Human Behavior, which should be familiar to a lot of you who've been on this channel before. We talked about Nature Human Behavior's very, very twisted editorial guidelines that they put forward recently to basically reject things that may possibly cause harm to people who were not participants in the study. Let's see. Misinformation online poses a range of threats, from subverting democratic processes to undermining public health measures. Proposed solutions range from encouraging more selective sharing by individuals to removing false content and accounts that promote it, which might just be amounting to censorship. Here we provide a framework to evaluate interventions aimed at reducing viral misinformation online, both in isolation and when used in combination. We begin by deriving a generative model of viral misinformation spread inspired by research on infectious disease. By applying this model to a large corpus, 10.5 million tweets, damn, of misinformation events that occurred during the 2020 election, we reveal that commonly proposed interventions are unlikely to be effective in isolation. However, our framework demonstrates that a combined approach can achieve a substantial reduction in the prevalence of misinformation. Our results highlight a practical path forward as misinformation online continues to threaten vaccination efforts, equity, and democratic processes around the globe. Oh, geez. And now I'm just looking because I'm curious. I mean, this is a research article. Misinformation. Wait, what? Misinformation has become a pervasive feature of online discourse, resulting in increased belief in conspiracy theories, rejection of recommended public health interventions, and even genocide? Really? I have to go look that one up. No. The long fees, Mr. Technical report. There's the Election Integrity Partnership. They're actually citing the Election Integrity Partnership's 2020 after action report, which we'll get to that. I do want to mention that in a minute. But poison if you don't know how to use it. Facebook democracy and human rights in Myanmar. Okay. So something. I might have missed something going on in Myanmar. Let me know if you guys know of anything going on in Myanmar that would play into this. But let me just see here because I'm curious. Misinformation. First, you mentioned it like 80 some odd times on the page. Academics and those working in the industry of ranging from detecting and removing misinformation to empowering users to be more discerning. I don't have a problem with empowering to be more discerning. I do have a problem with just removing stuff outright, but that's a whole other thing. Early response to rapidly spreading. Okay, beyond comparison. What did they? So interestingly, they Directed events, models. Okay, hold on. Using Bayesian methods. Ooh, get into some Bayesian statistics. Get into the good stuff here. Get into the good stuff with Bayesian stats. Bayesian stats is not like the classical stats if you learned it in college. Bayesian stats is quite a bit different and quite a bit more involved in doing analysis. So I understand that. Okay. This is our final. Begin by considering the impacts of interventions targeting specific contact on user engagement, that is total posts, retweets, tweets, quote tweets, and replies. Among the more commonly employed strategies during the 2020 US election was identifying specific misinformation and taking action, ranging from applying a label to outright removal. These approaches share a common feature of requiring time before the action is taken. Time is necessary not only to identify misinformation, but also to decide on an appropriate response. In an extreme case, a platform could hide or could remove or hide all content matching search terms related to an emerging misinformation incident. I kind of love the language with some of these things. The emerging misinformation incident. Anyway, to simulate this, we ran our model until a given time point at which growth was stopped entirely. Okay, so they're basically modeling the occurrence. Now I understand what's going on here. They are modeling from the 10.5 million tweets. They're modeling a misinformation event that may happen. Yeah, overview of our data processing and generative model of it. So this is not necessarily stuff that's happening in real time as much as they created a model and then applied their potential interventions, as they call it, to said model. Here, when you're talking about some of this kind of misinformation research that's going on. So let's see. These effects generally assume that platforms can monitor, detect, and sufficiently fact check and implement a full removal response within a specified time frame. And results indicate that outright removal can indeed be effective, producing 93.8% median reduction in total posts. That is, tweets, replies, quote tweets, and retweets on the topic if implemented within 30 minutes. Even with a 4-hour delay, our model indicates reductions of 55.6%. Why 89% confidence intervals? That's weird. Hold on a second. That's actually really weird. Usually when you're talking about stats related stuff, they do 95% confidence intervals. So why an 89% confidence interval? That's really weird. Usually it's 90 or 95 or 99. Those are pretty standard. Very strange to me that you see 89 here. Anyway, these effects generously assume that platforms can monitor, detect, sufficiently fact check, and implement a full removal response within this time frame. As such, the efficacy is dramatically reduced if only a fraction of events lead to action. So in other words, if they rip it down before you get the chance to see it, the idea of something can't go further. So, goodness. A more plausible approach could involve virality circuit breakers. What the heck? Which seek to reduce the spread of trending misinformation topic without explicitly removing content. For example, by suspending algorithmic amplification. This approach allows platforms to consider ethical ramifications while minimizing the public relations challenges accompanying direct forms of action. This could aid in lowering the threshold for fact-checking and therefore enable quicker response times. We simulate the impact of virality circuit breakers, that's a mouthful to say, by proportionately reducing the latent virality parameter in our model after a fixed time interval. Through simulations, we reveal how virality circuit breakers can have similar efficacy to outright removal, even if the amount by which virality is reduced is small. Figure 2C and supplementary table 3. For instance, a 10% reduction in virality implemented 4 hours after the start of an event can reduce the spread of misinformation by nearly 45.3%. As with outright removal, however, the efficacy is primarily limited by the proportion of events for which platforms take action. So let me see here. 2C is what they're talking about. The impact of applying a virality circuit breaker that reduces virality by 10% to all misinformation events after a specified period. So total posts. Okay. Oh, I see what it is. Delay a specific number of minutes as an A if only 20% are removed. Interesting. So basically that's not the outright removal, but that might be more considered like, your algorithm isn't sending something around as much necessarily with this kind of stuff. So that's a little bit different for sure. It's still, I've said it on this channel a few times. If you've watched the videos on my channel, you know this, but doing research. Okay, how about, let me put it this way. No, I said it on some other videos talking about Scientific American and Nature. No amount of scientific research can determine whether or not something is a right. And this doesn't, just because they are saying that this would work, doesn't necessarily consider the ethical considerations of it. In terms of, of course you don't want necessarily wild conspiracy theories and things to go spreading around, but at the same time, you also shouldn't censor people necessarily would be the other argument in that. That kind of dynamic of whether or not you should do something is not what they get into in this kind of research. And this kind of research study like this. Yes, they think misinformation, disinformation is a bad thing from their perspective. I have yet to see a definition here. But at the same time, you have to, you have no sense of whether or not this should be done. If it is totally, we just have to reduce the spread of this thing, then you might take it that this states, no, yeah, we should do this to reduce the spread. But at the same time, you're ignoring the other ethical concerns that come in there with respect to what does it mean to have free speech on the internet at this point is what we're getting into. Nudges and reduced reach, things along that line. This isn't meant to be a full review of this article. Account banning. Some of these repeat offenders had outsized audiences compared with the average Twitter user, ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions of followers. While removal of repeat offenders during the election was rare, several were removed after the violent insurrection at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. You can make your own opinions on that statement. The question remains whether removing these accounts or account-focused policies in general would have a meaningful impact on misinformation. While large followings often confer engagement, it remains possible that there is sufficient sharing from smaller accounts to ensure the spread of misinformation, even in the absence of the larger removed accounts. Oh boy. One challenge in modeling account removal is that there are probably non-trivial relationships between account size, the propensity to share misinformation, and the timing at which certain accounts amplify narratives. A large account that regularly shares misinformation in the first 5 minutes will have an outsized effect compared with a smaller account that occasionally shares misinformation hours later. To account for this, our model samples from the empirical follower count distribution in a given time step. Furthermore, as the identities of the individuals are known, we can remove specific accounts and simulate total engagement. In other words, our simulations are conditioned on unseen patterns of and variation in individual behavior without explicitly quantifying the differences in individual behavior. Our model simulations and therefore our model and simulations therefore exhibit robustness to considerable unmeasured real world complexity. Okay. 3 strikes rule. Okay. First, consider consequences of account removals. Simulations reveal that the removal of these accounts reduce total engagement by 30%. Okay. It's comparable in efficacy to a 10% reduction in sharing misinformation. That is a nudge, impacting all accounts in the absence of removal. 3 strikes rule, which accounts are removed from the platform after they detect 3 separate incidents of misinformation. Again, I have yet to see a very cogent definition of what misinformation actually is, but that's a whole other thing. Again, this is, just because it may work in the modeled world, bear in mind, this is also a model world. This is not necessarily the real world here that they're talking about. Doesn't mean it's necessarily should do it. There's other ethical considerations that come in here that are actually quite getting ignored in all of this. So, but this is actually a good jumping off point because I did want to show you all before we sign off here about the, I wonder if they have, I think they have it down here, about finding out more about who funded this research and why. Just in general terms, when you're thinking about the different kinds of research that are funded in the, I believe it was in the 80s, there was a law passed that required transparency with respect to the grants. So if it's a federal funded grant, funded by any of the federal agencies, be it NSF or NOAA or Interior, go on down the list, the information about that grant and how much in taxpayer dollars went toward it has to be available online somewhere publicly. NSF does a good job of making it very, very well available and very easy to find things that have been funded in the past. And there are others which are less so. The same rule does not necessarily apply to private foundations, which is in part paying for some of this. Center for Informed Public, University of Washington eScience Institute, and Craig Newark Philanthropies, JDW, ESS, those are the author's initials, acknowledge the support of the National Science Foundation award number. This is typically what happens if it's a federally funded grant. You can always find the award number, and you can do searches on NSF by the award number to actually get some information about that award and how much it was specifically in dollars. So I'm going to give you an example of that before we go here. I'm going to take this and then I'm going over here. So on the National Science Foundation website, you can find it if you're looking to search awards in here, and then there's an option here for an advanced search. That's the one that I always go to when I'm looking for information. If you have the award number, that's the easiest thing in here. So find an exact award number. I put that right there. And then you hit search. And oh, heck, it didn't come back. That's interesting. Usually it does come back with a number. That's interesting. I don't quite know what happened unless active and expired awards. There we go. We probably want everything. Make sure I got that number right. And find exact. Why won't you let me click it now? There we go. One of the things you may want to do is that when you're doing a search, active awards mean that's a currently active project. You can go find information and money on currently active ongoing projects that NSF is paying for. But you also want to include expired awards here because it's stuff that the project is already closed, the money's already been spent. You can look at those too. Yeah, there it is. That's why it didn't come up quite away, because it's already been spent. Oh yeah, look at that. So let's see here. The project that funded this particular study, or part of it at least, Division of Computer and Network Systems at the NSF, awardee is the University of Washington. All of this kind of stuff is pretty much available information. And what most of you may not realize is that actually when you're coming to universities, quite often because of the legalese involved in submitting a grant, the university is technically considered the awardee, not the specific professor who submitted the grant, because the university will often submit on your behalf rather than you yourself submitting, because there is a tremendous amount of legalese that's involved. You can, okay, here is total award amount here. Let me see if I can't blow this up a little bit because it's tiny. Total award amount that was spent. So on this particular project, not all of it went toward that particular paper, but $197,538 in fiscal year 2020, and ended in September 2021. Kind of there with the project. You can also find the abstract associated. So things like this are great information if you're going and hunting for stuff about the research. And if it's ever funded by any U.S. federal agency, the award information has to be available somewhere. That is a legal thing in the United States. It must be available somewhere for you to find it. In the case of NSF makes it very easy to search for it. I think grants.gov is the other one that covers most of the federal government. That way you can find also. And so it's just taking some time to look around and search for these particular things. So the other one that they had here, NSF Career Award, that's a very specific program in NSF, but we can certainly do a search for that too. Go back to the advanced search. Expired awards, find award number, search. Yeah, there we go. University of Washington, Division of Information and Intelligence Systems. There's different divisions within SF that fund different things here. And so this is actually wow, hot damn. $550,000 for that one going to this particular person. And what have you with their actual information here. So this project will improve our understanding of the spread of disinformation in online environments, will contribute to the field of human-computer interaction in the areas of social computing, crisis informatics, human-centered data science, etc. Conceptually explores the relationships between technology structure and human action, applying the lens of structuration theory towards understanding how technological affordances shape online action, and how online actions shape the underlying structure of the information space, and how those integrated structures, and so on. So the online spread of disinformation is a societal problem at the intersection of online systems and human behavior. This research program aims to enhance our understanding of how and why disinformation spreads. Okay. This is certainly interesting. Let me see. Research has 3 specific interrelated objectives. 1, to better understand the generation, evolution, and propagation of disinformation. To extend, support, and articulate an evolving methodological approach for analyzing, quote, big social media data for use in identifying, communicating information provenance related to disinformation flows. 3, to adapt and transfer the tools and methods of this approach for use by diverse users for identification of disinformation and communication of its origins and trajectories. More broadly, it will contribute to the advancement of science through enhanced understandings and conceptualizations of relationship between technology affordances, social network structure, human behavior, and intentional strategies of deception. The program includes an education plan that supports PhD student training and recruits diverse undergraduate students into research through multiple mechanisms, including 4-credit research groups and an academic bridge program. So WORD reflects NSF's statutory mission and has been deemed worthy of support through evaluation through the Foundation's intellectual merit and broader impacts review criteria. This is not part of the abstract necessarily. It's actually more so connected, with NSF saying, yeah, we reviewed this, we think it's okay. That's pretty much all that statement is there for. And often you will also find any other things that were supported by that particular grant here. Any publications that were the result of support from that particular grant, you will find them underneath. So you can always dig in and find these things. Obviously, this is more so about just, going into the ideas. I don't support anyone going into dealing with any level of harassment of an individual or anything like that. But if you're interested in some of the ideas, where they came from, how they were funded, all this other kind of stuff, you can certainly find it. If NSF funded it or if any of the federal agencies funded it, you can absolutely find it. I think there was another one I had here. Yeah, this is one of the Stanford grants, actually. So this actually goes to that Stanford, I think it's at Stanford Institute of, that Stanford Internet Observatory, excuse me. And disinformation is a critical, pressing challenge for society. It diminishes our ability to, you see, yeah, here's that statement from NSF again, just saying, oh yeah, we found this one to be good. Repeat spreaders of comprehensive, yep. Journal of Quantitative Description, Digital Media, Volume 2, 2022. Repeat spreaders and election delegitimization, a comprehensive data set of misinformation tweets from the 2020 election. So things like that do come up in the misinformation research world. This project has not ended. So you can certainly tell if a project is ended or if it is continuing. And NSF has agreed to pay for it. So, I mean, they're obviously still paying out the bill with this one. But total awarded so far, $309,705. They are anticipating almost $750,000 going to this particular project at Stanford. So this is one of those interesting things that you can certainly see a lot of information available here. And this is why I bring this up, is because if you're ever interested in finding information about, how much money was spent on a grant or anything like that, you can certainly look. And there's more than one way to look. You can also, you can look by institution. You can look by investigator name if you know the professor. So like, let me see here. How about I do it this way? Stanford University. I don't know why I did that in all caps. Disinformation. Yep, so that's the main one. Although I think, did I do something weird? I did. I forgot this always gets unchecked, so you might want to just recheck that if something gets unchecked. There you go. Oh, so that's the big one right now. That's the only one that Stanford really has. Really has actively. So it's probably more so that's going on at Stanford than we know about, and certainly not just from NSF. Going on here. So it's something to take a look for. You can certainly look for certain. How about we do it the other way? How about instead of disinformation, misinformation instead? There we go. That's a little bit more in here. And you can always get a little point line thing here of, how much money is being spent on that particular thing by that institution. There's always a little summary here. So let's see, that's almost $550,000. That's not quite as relevant, I would think. Or is that? Although I'm curious. Oh, that's a $37,000 one. It's expired. That's well expired. Yeah, that's several years old. Very different. That's not quite what we're looking for. So sometimes the search doesn't give you exactly what you're after, but it is a good way to go in and find if you're looking for NSF for research related things, funding and what have you. I've been rambling here for a little while. I'm starting to lose my voice. But that's just pretty much what I wanted to bring up today, is to mention some of the things about misinformation research and disinformation research, and where you can go to find some of these things, and getting into some of the studies. This is certainly an interesting one. Although, as I said, this one is a good reminder of some of the challenges with the ethical things in science, because just because a scientific study says that if you do this, it probably will have this effect, doesn't mean you necessarily should do it. There's more considerations there than just what the scientific side of thing may say in terms of the research. There's also the ethical considerations, and no amount of scientific study can say what is or is not a human right. That comes back to the legal and the philosophical questions involved in that. So it's very tricky that way. And although this one does give me the creeps, this particular article does give me the creeps because of the observations. Well, not the observations made. It is a creepy thing to say, oh yeah, we can do this just by removing people, or removing this thing, or making sure it's not heard. I got problems with that from a free speech and a free expression perspective, along with academic freedom, particularly since more and more scientists are communicating on Twitter and YouTube and the rest. So that's going to be the interesting thing with this. And to make the point here a bit more, I do want to add one last thing. This is from that said Election Integrity Project, from the 2020 After Action Report. And I did want to make a note about this. And again, this is where I think sometimes you're crossing a line. So they did make several recommendations on the basis of their work, and that's fine. Make recommendations. But kind of one of them is a creepy kind of thing that I wonder about, where you're getting into potentially violations of the First Amendment, which still does matter in the United States. So there is that. Obviously, you can't know for sure with that, because it's identifying and countering election-related misinformation, disinformation, authorities and roles, establish clear authorities and roles. It is more than a little creepy. So that's why it kind of bothers me when it goes from research to policy recommendation in particular. That is where other ethical considerations have to come into play, not just whatever the research says or whatever the group of scientists involved here want to say. So with that in mind, I'm going to close up shop, I think, and close this SciChat Saturday. I hope you enjoyed. This is the first one. The next one will hopefully be on November the 19th. Does anybody have any if anybody has any closing thoughts and questions, ask them now or forever hold your peace. I'm going to fix one glitch with the live stream that I saw come up, so I'm going to re-upload the live stream feed later. So we'll take care of that. But have any questions, forever hold your peace. If you are a supporter of locals, of my young locals at shiosofia.locals.com, I will be over there momentarily to stream live just for supporters and answer some of your questions and get into some other details. So if you have, thank you, Rick. I'm glad to hear from you. Yeah, if you have any other questions that you want answered at the and you're a supporter of shiosofia.locals.com, come on over there, and I'll be going live there momentarily for an after show with a little bit of discussions and commentary. November 19th will be the next SciChat Saturday, and I will have the first guest also to join me on that show. I don't know quite who it's going to be yet, but we're going to have a guest. Well, thank you, Karen. I'm glad folks could show up. I hope the quality is better than when I tested this a couple of weeks ago. I did do a hardwire connection this time. But some of those fun things with misinformation research, I don't know, misinformation, disinformation is just creepy. It's just utterly creepy to me. But thank you all for coming. Again, if you're a supporter, go on over to shiosofia.locals.com, and I will be going live there momentarily for about 10-20 minutes to get your questions answered if you're a supporter, and you get that exclusive access. So until next time, of course, I'll be back with more videos next week. But until next time, I hope you all have a great weekend. Have a very happy Halloween. Dr. Bones back there says have a happy Halloween. And stay curious, everybody.